Hello, welcome back to Karborundum Quest. Now, here we have the problem episode. Basically, what happened was I recorded the launching of this particular Karborundum harvester, the first that I've ever created properly, not part of a ship. It's its own independent thing. And what happened in the making of this was I was filming as I was doing it. I recorded it 3 times, and good old Bandicam messed up my final version's footage. The video is completely scrapped, I can't use it. So this is one of the earlier versions that I'm just showing to sort of show you essentially what I did. I did the exact same thing every time, I just slightly changed the design and added some more solar panels, and took off one of the separators because it exploded. I went to jettison it and the actual shroud around the main engine that I use exploded. Which you can see here. There we go. And when that exploded, I actually took out all of my radiators and damaged just north of the actual engine. There was one of the solar panels, or the only solar panel, and it killed it so badly that I couldn't use it. So what happened was, from that point, I redid it a couple of times, added more solar panels, and lost the entire video. Now all that I'm doing is I'm actually coming down to 5.5 billion kilometers around about the sun. Kerbal, as anybody in the Kerbin KSP knows, the Kerbin sun is Kerbal. And we have this lovely Karborundum harvester, the big solar sail that you can see on the front of it. Here you can see the updated version. This was a video from the actual final run, and all I did was I scooped past, and just behind that solar cell you can see the tanks, a couple of little Karborundum engines there. Got myself into a low orbit, an elliptical orbit, shot past, filled the tanks, came back up to the orbit, and then had to go round twice to get the orbit back to Kerbal correct, using most of the fuel. Aside from the Karborundum, I was trying to save as much of that as possible. And this is just me slowing down on the re-entry into the Kerbin system, the planetary system. Ran out of fuel. These things happen. So decided, and I made allowances for this, I decided to use the Karborundum fusion drives. However, I completely forgot that they would require some electricity, and there you see that's what happens when you leave the throttle on. So once I managed to get the other engine on, I don't want to do the time warp trick, get the other engine on and fire it up to try and decelerate. And now, as you can see by the delta V on the top left, I have a ridiculous amount of delta V, but because of the tiny little solar panels on this lander, I don't actually have enough power to run it. So I have to run it in stages, and eventually got the little hint to time warp to charge up the electricity, then run it for about 4 or 5 seconds for it to run down, and then repeat the process. I ended up orbiting 3 times to try and slow down. So I finally get it down, and this comes to the most worrying part, and this recording here is the first time I managed to do it. I've experimented with Karborundum before, and this was the entire basis of this series, is that once you know how to harvest it in career mode, you can make, it takes a while, but you can make a good amount of money to do all sorts of extravagant things. In the same way we theorise, or some people theorise, how helium-3 will manage to expand what we do on the planet. So this is the first time I've managed to re-enter. Or I say managed to re-enter, this is the first time I've come close to trying to land this. I've tried it on a few different occasions, but I used bigger tanks before, running it in a sandbox, and I never managed to land it once. So my biggest worry here coming through, and this is why I recorded the entire thing, and this is why it took so long. I was so happy with it, because of how heavy Karborundum is. It's insanely dense. It creates a problem, as you can see by the amount of parachutes I have on this. They were I was trying to run it without testing it. I was trying to use one of my mods that tell me what your impact speed is going to be if your tanks are full or empty or things like that. So I was using this mod to try and gauge it, and I wanted to go overboard because I really didn't want to lose this. So what I've done is basically come up with a theory of how I'm going to land it, and this is the first attempt to try and get it down onto the ground. Now, my biggest worry here is landing. What I've actually done for this mission is I've taken out a whole load of extra contracts to try and get enough money to get the 1.3 million it would take to build this rocket and send it. I've sent supplies up to all of my stations, and everything was ready to run. They're still harvesting science. I have 2 stations left at the moment. I deliberately crashed the moon station into the moon because it was becoming a bit of a pain and it wasn't really worth the amount I was making out of it. So the Minma station is running science. It has 2 science labs running in parallel now. The Mir station, which is the station I have just orbiting Kerbin, isn't really doing much. It just has 2 people on board there, but the life support is set up so that both stations have about 3-4 years worth of supplies, which would allow me to do this mission, to send a long scale probe, or long time probe, around about the sun and re-enter it. The actual time that this probe took in game time was over a year and a half, actually getting it down to the low orbit and then bringing it back, having to loop around a couple of times to get it to adjust. It was a year and a half in game time, and for myself it was actually about 2.5 hours worth of gameplay just to get this one thing done, and then I lost all that footage. So this is the worrying bit. I was just absolutely panicking at this point because I'd never tried to land anything this heavy. As I say, Karborundum is ridiculously dense, and one of my contingency plans was to use the Karborundum drives to try and limit it down. And if you look up at the thrust to weight ratio at the right hand side of the altimeter at the top of the screen, you can see it's going down to almost nothing. I turned it on just to make sure, but yeah, it wasn't worth anything. But we tip over, we land, we recover. I am absolutely elated, and after being ridiculously nervous and clicking on thing, we have over 60 million in recovered funds. So that was 1.3 million to send out this mission and 60 million recovered. It took just over a year and a half for it to happen. So that's a good way of funding. It now means that I've made about 6 times as much as any other mission so far. So I'll see you next time.